Welcome to today's class on the topic antidiarrheals and purgatives. First, what is diarrhea? Diarrhea is abnormal increase in the frequency and the liquidity of stools. In the frequency means it is the number of times they are going for stools is increased and the liquidity of the stools has increased. Major factors causing this diarrhea is increased motility of GIT, means increased movement in the gastrointestinal system, and then decreased ability of intestine to absorb water from stool. Like whatever we take the food inside, when it goes through the gastrointestinal system, usually the water is absorbed from that bulk here in this diagram. Like when the water is reabsorbed by the body from whatever we are taking usually. But what happens in diarrhea is this stool has too much water to reabsorb. See here, like you can see the blue arrows here and here. Here it is a normal system, and here in the case of diarrhea, the stool has too much water to reabsorb, because of which the liquidity of the stool increases. Now coming to the antidiarrheals, the drugs which are used to treat the diarrhea. Anti-motility and anti-secretory agents. As we know, the major causes of diarrhea is increase in the frequency because of the motility of the GIT increase, and because of the more fluid in the stools. So we need anti-motility and anti-secretory agents. Those are opioid agonists, anticholinergics, alpha-2 adrenergic receptor agonist, octreotide, adsorbent drugs, miscellaneous agents, and then coming to non-pharmacological measures, which involves fluid and electrolyte therapy like oral rehydration therapy. Now we will go in detail. Coming to opioid agonist. These drugs acts by stimulating the peripheral mu receptors and delta receptors present on small and large intestine. These mu receptors, when stimulated, they decreases the motility of the intestine, and when the delta receptors are stimulated, they decreases the intestinal secretions. So that's how they affect the diarrhea. The drugs which comes under these opioid agonists, which are used as an antidiarrheal are loperamide, difenoxylate, difenoxin, resigadotril. This difenoxin is an active metabolite of difenoxylate. Now coming to loperamide, this loperamide is an over-the-counter drug. You must have also known this drug many a times. If you like simply go to pharmacy and ask a tablet for diarrhea, they will give this loperamide, yellowish tablets. And these capsules, sorry, it's not tablets, capsules. And over-the-counter drug, this drug doesn't cross blood-brain barrier, means it is not being passed through the barrier into the brain. So like because of this, like there are no analgesic effects, no addiction liability. So they are dopamine is safer, and it is 40 times more potent than morphine as an antidiarrheal. Coming to the dose, 4 milligrams followed by 2 milligrams after every loose motion, to a maximum of 16 milligrams per day. In chronic diarrheas, chronic means like diarrheas which are persisting for a longer time. It like 2 to 4 milligrams 3 times a day is given. Coming to difenoxylate, this as I have already told you, this active metabolite of difenoxylate is difenoxin. This have no analgesic properties, but here when you give the drug in higher doses, there is CNS depressant effects, And also when it is used for prolonged time, it can cause this dependence liability. What is this dependence liability? Is the patient may have an urge to take the drug again and again. Coming to the potency, you can see that it is more potent as an antidiarrheal than morphine, but it is not as potent as loperamide. It is less potent than loperamide, but more potent than morphine. Most popular formulation is diphenoxylate plus atropine, 2 tablets taken 3 times a day or 4 times a day. Atropine is added in this formulation to decrease this dependence liability, because this atropine, if taken too much, it can cause anticholinergic side effects which will be uncomfortable for the patient. So he might not get used to the drug uses. It is effective against traveler's diarrhea and prevents any non-specific diarrhea, means the cause is not known exactly for the diarrhea. Those diarrheas also, you can simply give these opioid agonists, and it is contraindicated in these opioid agonists are contraindicated in patients with colitis, that is inflammation of the colon, and then acute bacterial diarrheas associated with high fever and blood in stool. Why it is contraindicated here is, in acute bacterial diarrheas, what happens is through the diarrhea, the pathogens are excreted, are being flushed out. But if you give an antidiarrheal, what happens? The stool will be staying inside the intestine itself, and there is a higher chance the pathogen can multiply because it is not getting flushed out. So you should see like if the diarrhea is also accompanied with any high fever, or is there any blood in the stool. And these antidiarrheals are not also they are also contraindicated in children below 2 years of age. Resigadotril, this is an N-caffeinase inhibitor. Encaphalins, these what they do is, in the intestinal mucosa, these are not naturally occurring. These stimulate the mu and delta receptors, and we already saw what the mu and delta receptors will do. So what happening is, this enkephalins will be degraded by this enkephalinase enzyme. This drug is inhibiting this enzyme, because of which these enkephalins are increased in the intestinal mucosa. So the increased enkephalins acts on this mu and delta receptors, giving this antidiarrheal effects. Anti-secretory effects are more than anti-motility effects when this risperidone is given. Usual adult dose of this drug is 100 to 300 milligrams thrice a day. Side effects include nausea, constipation, and headache. And this resicadotril is secreted through breast milk, so caution is given in case of lactating mothers. And anticholinergics. These anticholinergics, how they will act as antidiarrheal, is they decrease the bowel motility, because of which when they decrease the bowel motility, what happens? The bulk will stay for a longer time in the intestine, and due to which there is a more chance of fluid absorption. They will increase the fluid absorption, and then it also decreases the abdominal cramps. The drugs which which are used as antidiarrheals are hyoscyamine and dicyclomine. These are are not used individually. They are usually are given with combinations, with adsorbent drugs or opiates. They are given in combination. Coming to alpha-2 adrenergic receptor agonists, how they act is facilitates absorption, inhibition of secretion of fluids and electrolyte. What it is doing is this inhibition of secretion of fluids and electrolytes into the lumen, due to which that fluidity of the stool will be decreased, that liquidity. liquidity of that stool will be decreased, due to which the diarrhea effect will be decreased. And also this increases the intestinal transit time, means it is making the stool stay for a longer time in the intestine. The drug which is used as antidiarrheal is clonidine, which it is given in 0.1 milligram twice a day orally. Where it is used is in diabetic diarrhea or any diarrhea caused by opiate withdrawal. But the major limiting factor of these drug is this decreases the blood pressure. So this is not quite used, like it is very rarely used as antidiarrheal. Coming to octreotide, this is a synthetic octapeptide. It is an analog of somatostatin. This is a hormone, naturally occurring hormone in our body. This drug has longer half-life than somatostatin. Somatostatin's half-life is 3 minutes, but this octreotide, it is 1.5 to 2 hours. And this octreotide inhibits secretion of growth hormone, this glucagon. The spelling is wrong here. GLUCAGON, glucagon, insulin, and VIP. That's it, VIP. That is vasoactive intestinal peptide. Vasoactive intestinal peptide. Antidiarrheal effects of this drug is due to the inhibition of release of serotonin, gastrin, secretin, CCK, motilin, and pancreatic polypeptide. CCK means cholecystokinin. Now coming to like what it does because of those inhibition of those hormones. It reduces the GIT motility, intestinal fluid and electrolyte secretion, pancreatic secretion, and gallbladder contractions are also reduced. So like where is this octreotide used? Secretory diarrheas associated with carcinoid tumors and vasoactive intestinal peptide secreting tumors. And also this drug is also used in treating acromegaly, which is like a growth condition where there is an increased growth hormone release, because of which the person will be growing taller than normal. And many other conditions are associated with acromegaly. You will be knowing it in other detail in other hormones. Prevent variceal bleeding. These are the uses. Coming to dose of the drug, this is given as 100 micrograms twice a day or thrice a day subcutaneously. Side effects of this octreotide. This short-term therapy, usually nausea, abdominal discomfort, pain at site of injection is given, is seen because of the short-term therapy. And in long-term therapy, it can cause gallstone formation, because as we saw here, it is also reducing the gallbladder contractions, and then it can cause hypothyroidism, and it can cause impaired pancreatic secretion, due to which it will cause steatorrhea. Because of the steatorrhea, there can be fat soluble vitamin deficiency. So what happens, what are the fat soluble vitamins? A, D, E, K, as you know, those are the fat soluble vitamins that deficiency can occur because of the steatorrhea. Now coming to adsorbent drugs. What are the adsorbent drugs? Kaolin, pectin, bismuth, subsalicylate. This kaolin, what is this? It is a hydrated magnesium aluminum silicate. And then pectin, it is an indigestible purified carbohydrate obtained from apple. both these caveolin and pectin, what they do is adsorb bacteria. Here you have to observe this D, adsorb. It's not absorb, it is adsorb. What is adsorbing is like the bacteria will be attached to the agent on the surface. It will not be taken inside, it will be attached on that caveolin or pectin, and it will carry that kaolin will carry the bacteria outside, like it will be flushed out through the stools. So these also absorb enterotoxins if there are any, and fluid to increase the consistency of the fecal matter. And bismuth subsalicylate, how it is acting is by inhibiting the prostaglandin synthesis and chloride secretion. This causes the reduction of stool frequency and liquidity. This bismuth subsalicylate also has some antimicrobial effects. This absorbs enterotoxins also, and it also provides protective coating over inflamed gastric mucosa if there is any inflammation. Coming to dose, 524 milligrams or 30 to 60 ml every 6 hours daily to control the traveler's diarrhea. In case of acute diarrhea, it can be increased up to 8 doses per 24 hours. And there are minimal side effects of these drugs because they are not systemically absorbed or anything. So, minimal side effects. It might cause constipation. Uh, and the bismuth subsalicylate can cause blackening of the stool, which might scare the patient, but you can say it is normal. And then it can also cause the darkening of tongue, which is also not too much to be worried about. And point to be noted is no adsorbent drugs should be taken within 2 hours of other medication. Any medication, whatever you take, you should not take within 2 hours, because these adsorbent drugs will absorb whatever drug is taken. So there will be no effect of the drug. Now coming to miscellaneous agents, Lactobacillus porogens. This is a bacteria. This replaces the normal bacteria flora that is lost during this acute diarrhea or due to use of antibiotics, because normally the diarrhea cause can be a bacterial infections. Then you might use this antibiotics, because of which normal flora can also be destroyed. So this Lactobacillus porogens is used, and it is used as an adjuvant for aphthous stomatitis. Means stomatitis is a condition where there is inflammation in the mouth, and also used as adjuvant in diarrhea. Lactase, this is an enzyme. This is indicated in individuals with insufficient amount of lactase in the small intestine. This lactase is normally what it does is it acts on this lactose and it will help in the degradation. But what happens is this lactose draws the water into the gastrointestinal tract and causes the diarrhea. But this lactase enzyme is absent, due to which the lactose is acting more. So when we give this lactase enzyme, this lactose effect on the bulk of the stool will be decreased. Dose of this lactase is 1 to 2 capsules of lactase taken with milk. Coming to non-pharmacological measures, that is fluid and electrolyte therapy, oral rehydration therapy. What happens is during diarrhea, a glucose coupled sodium transport continues in the intestine. Because of this transport, water and electrolyte loss happens a lot. So what should we do? We should replace that fluid whatever is lost in the diarrhea. So glucose electrolyte solutions are effective. However, if fluid loss is severe or that severe vomiting persisting, then IV fluid should be given to the patient. Coming to this table, this is the glucose based ORS, that can be easily be made at home as per WHO standard formula. World Health Organization standard formula. Initially, it was 311 millimole per liter osmolarity when this total of this is calculated. But now they changed that formula a little, and now it is 245 millimoles per liter. These are the ingredients: sodium chloride, potassium chloride, sodium citrate, glucose, and water. These are the main ingredients should be present in the oral rehydration solution. And you can see here in the differences between these two is, here sodium chloride is 3.5 grams, here 2.6 grams. Potassium chloride and sodium citrate are the same, 1.5 and 2.9. Glucose, here 20 grams are given, here only 13.5 grams are given. Water 1 liter each, 1 liter both of them. And in children and infants, you can decrease the amount of glucose and this potassium. Coming to how should be that ORS should be given. For mild to moderate diarrhea in adults, approximately 2 to 3 liters of any one of the ORS, as we saw in the previous table, any one of them can be given in 2 to 3 liters and should be consumed within first 4 hours. And earlier, as I said, in children, the glucose and I said potassium, sorry for that, not potassium, low sodium. Sodium and glucose amount should be decreased in the children. And during diarrhea, what should be avoided to the patients? Carbonated soft drinks, tea, coffee, powdered drinks, hypertonic juices, these all should be avoided for the patients. Why? Because they don't have any necessary electrolytes which are needed for the patient, and also they might increase the diarrhea. Coming to cereal based ORS, what are the advantages of cereal based ORS over the glucose electrolyte ORS? This controls diarrhea more effectively than glucose based ORS. And this why is because possibly that undigested starch is fermented in the colon to short chain fatty acids, which stimulates the sodium and water absorption back from colon, due to which it effectively controls the diarrhea. And rice powder has 7% protein, which on hydrolysis yields amino acids that too stimulates the colonic salt and water retention. This is the rice based ORS formula, pre-cooked rice flour here. And see, like there is no glucose here. There is only pre-cooked rice flour. And others, sodium chloride, sodium citrate, and potassium citrate commonly is there. And water is lesser. There it we saw 1 liter, here 200 milliliter. This is the rice based oral rehydration solution. Now we completed the antidiarrheals until now, antidiarrheals and non-pharmacological measures for the diarrhea. Now coming to purgatives. What are purgatives? These purgatives are used for complete colonic cleansing. Why? In what conditions we need complete colonic cleansing? It is used to treat the constipation or to avoid undue straining at defecation in cases having hernia, hemorrhoids, or cardiovascular disease. In hernia, like already the intestines are pushed out of their place, and if you strain at defecation, it might get even more worse. And hemorrhoids, piles, we say, that condition we already have that um, hemorrhoids hanging out, and if you keep on putting more strain, it might get worse. And cardiovascular disease, you should not put strain on the heart. Before or after any anorectal surgery or gastrointestinal endoscopic procedures. And also for post-operative or post-MI means myocardial infarction, bedridden patients, and to flush out worms after the use of an antihelminthic drug, and to prepare the bowel before surgery or abdominal x-ray, and may be needed for neurologically impaired patients. So what are the different types of purgatives? Bulk forming purgatives, osmotic purgatives, lubricant purgatives, surfactant purgatives, and irritant purgatives. These are the bulk farming purgatives: wheat bran, psyllium husk, ispagula husk. Psyllium husk and ispagula husk are no, like are the same. This is how it looks: psyllium husk or ispagula husk, and this is wheat bran. Other bulk farming purgatives are semi-synthetic cellulose, which includes carboxymethyl cellulose and polycarbophils. These are the two photos to show you the drugs, how they are being sold. You can see here methyl cellulose, and this is like polycarbophils. These these purgatives, these bulk forming purgatives are luminally active, means like lumin means inside the intestine. uh, it is luminally active, hydrophilic, indigestible vegetable fibers. What they do is they stimulate the peristalsis and defecation reflexes by increasing the fecal bulk. They increase the stool bulk, and they stimulates the peristalsis so that the movement will happen and it will be flushed out. Coming to doses, adequate amount of water should be taken with bulk forming laxatives, and effects appear within 1 to 3 days after taking the purgative. This bran powder or those husk can be sprinkled over stewed food. Stewed means like cooked food only, and nothing to be wondering about what it is. And these purgatives are not absorbed, so they are quite safe. And uh, one of the side effect is bacterial digestion of these fibers in that purgative within colon may lead to bloating and flatus, may cause the abdominal discomfort to the patient. Coming to osmotic purgatives, it saline purgatives, polyethylene glycol, lactulose, sorbitol. In saline purgatives again, magnesium sulfate, magnesium hydroxide, which is also called milk of magnesia, sodium sulfate, and sodium phosphate. This is the polyethylene glycol, and this is the lactulose. This you might have seen Dufalac very commonly. And the saline purgatives. These are soluble inorganic salts. How they act is they increase the fecal bulk by retaining water by osmotic effect and increases the peristalsis. Magnesium salts, these release the cholecystokinin, which increases the intestinal secretions and peristalsis. Peristalsis is movement of the intestine. Coming to polyethylene glycol, it is a sugar that retains water by virtue of its high osmotic nature. When what happens if it is retaining water in the stool, the liquidity of the stool will be increased, so it will be passed easily. Used in form of balanced isotonic solution which contains sodium chloride, sodium sulfate, sodium bicarbonate, and potassium chloride. Isotonic solution of polyethylene glycol, there is no electrolyte shift occurs across the intestinal wall. Uh, this is prepared as an isotonic solution, so that no electrolyte shift should be happening. Coming to milk of magnesia, this is tasteless and most commonly used. The 30 ml of 8% suspension is given in the morning, and effects come within 2 to 3 hours. Polyethylene glycol, 4 liters of the solution ingested over 2 to 3 hours prior to any GIT endoscopic procedures. Chronic constipation, it can be given as smaller doses of solution, that is 300 to 500 ml daily in the morning, or 17 grams of powder in 8 ounces of water per day. Latency period means the time it is taking to act, like after the drug is taken, 2 to 3 hours. The latent period will be there. After 2 to 3 hours, it starts acting. Side effects, these should be ingested with enough water, because these are irritants, so they can cause the vomiting. And hyperosmolar agents, due to which it can cause intravascular fluid depletion and electrolyte disturbances. And where these should not be used is never in long term basis. It should not be used for longer time. And then in hypertensives and mm, congestive heart failure patients also, you should not use. And these magnesium salt should not be used in patients with renal insufficiency, because it can cause this hypermagnesemia. Coming to lactulose and sorbitol, this increases fecal bulk by hydrophilic action and also due to osmotic action. Dose is 10 grams twice a day or thrice a day, with plenty of water to produce 2 or 3 soft stools per day. And here it acts in 1 to 3 days. And this lactulose is non-toxic and suitable for long-term use. And it is also used in treatment of hepatic encephalopathy, where it is given as 20 grams thrice a day orally. Coming to lubricant purgatives, liquid paraffin is the lubricant purgative which is used. It is a luminally active, and it is an inert viscous liquid containing mineral oil. It is a fecal lubricant and stool softener, uh, given as 15 to 30 milliliters per day at bedtime, acts within 1 to 3 days, and used when straining at defecation to be avoided. Means different conditions where you should not put pressure, like hemorrhoids, we saw earlier, like hemorrhoids or hernia or any cardiovascular problems or any GIT procedures, etc. This is images for like how it will look. Liquid paraffin. Usually it is given in combination with other purgatives, milk of magnesia and sodium picosulfate suspension. And this is not palatable, like directly you cannot take orally, so it can be given with any juice or in emulsified form. And if this is frequently used, it can cause deficiency of fat soluble vitamins. And then if it is forced administration, it can cause aspiration lipid pneumonia. And also this is delays the healing of any enteric fistula if present in the patient. Coming to surfactant purgatives, that is dioctyl sodium sulfosuccinate, also called docusate sodium. It is also a luminally active agent, and it is an anionic surfactant. This how it acts is this softens the stool by decreasing the surface tension of fluids in the stool. This emulsifies colonic contents and facilitates mixing of water into fatty substances of the feces. These are how it looks. The capsules. How it is given is 100 to 400 milligrams orally per day in divided doses, and it is a mild laxative. Indicated, don't get confused. Laxative and purgative are the same thing, and indicated when straining at defecation to be avoided. It starts acting within 1 to 3 days, and it is not absorbed into the circulation, so it is not toxic. This drug, it is bitter in taste and can cause nausea, that is vomiting sensation, and cramps and abdominal pain also may occur. And if it is used in for a longer time, it can cause hepatotoxicity. Now coming to irritant purgatives, it contains again three types: anthraquinone group, organic irritants, and oils. Under anthraquinone group, we have senna, cascara, and yellow. Organic irritants, phenolphthalein, bisacodyl, and sodium picosulfate. Oils, castor oil. These all of the irritant purgatives stimulates the peristalsis, that is movement of the system, GIT system, by irritant action on the intestinal mucosa, and this stimulates the colonic electrolyte and fluid secretion by altering secretory and absorptive activity on mucosal cells. So more fluid and electrolytes will be secreted into the lumen of the intestine, due to which the stool will be softened and it will be passed easily. These are the images for senna. This is the senna plant. This is cascara. This is yellow, and this is castor oil. This is the bisacodyl laxative, and this is sodium picosulfate. Coming to this different like how they are metabolized in the intestine, this senna leaves, the senna glycosides, they will turn into, this is the active principle, it is anthrol. What happens is, in colon, bacteria will degrade this senna into anthrol. This anthrol will act. In bisacodyl, in intestine, it is turned into active deacetylated metabolite, which is the active form of the bisacodyl. And sodium picosulfate also in colon gets degraded into active metabolite. And castor oil, it is hydrolyzed by pancreatic lipase in intestine into ricinoleic acid. And coming to this here, the dose and latency period means after the drug is given, within 6 to 8 hours it will be acting like this. All of this senna glycosides, phenolphthalein, bisacodyl, and sodium picosulfate are given at bedtime, whereas castor oil is given in the morning, and the effects are seen in 3 hours. Senna glycosides 12 to 25 milligrams, phenolphthalein 60 to 130 milligrams, both acts within 6 to 8 hours, and bisacodyl 5 to 10 milligrams at bedtime, 8 to 10 hours is taken for its action. Sodium picosulfate also 5 to 10 milligrams at bedtime, but it takes 6 to 8 hours for to act. Castor oil 15 to 20 ml in the morning, takes 3 hours to act. Coming to side effects, senna glycosides should be avoided in lactating mothers because they are secreted through breast milk. And senna glycosides turns urine color to yellowish brown if the acidic urine, and red color if it is an alkaline urine. So you should like warn the patient before giving them, so that they will not be freaking out. Chronic use of the senna glycosides may result in characteristic brown pigmentation of colon. It is called melanosis coli, and it is contraindicated in pregnancy to avoid the pelvic congestion. Coming to phenolphthalein, it has a prolonged action because it undergoes enterohepatic circulation, and it turns urine reddish pink if the urine is alkaline. Coming to bisacodyl, it can cause a very rare, rarely it causes, but if there are side effects, they are abdominal cramps and skin rashes, but rare. Sodium picosulfate causes colonic atony and hypokalemia. Castor oil is unpalatable, like it is very bitter in taste, so a patient may not take it easily, and it can cause frequent cramping, and also there is an after constipation, means after stopping the castor oil again constipation is there. Then risk of damaging intestinal mucosa. So now castor oil is very rarely used as an purgative, and it is contraindicated in pregnancy because it might cause pelvic congestion. So until now we have completed antidiarrheals and purgatives. Now coming to nursing implications. So treat the cause if a definitive cause for the current symptoms can be identified. Means like for diarrhea or constipation. For diarrhea, there might be infections, like infection cause, like some pathogen may be existing because of which the diarrhea is there. So the cause should be treated. By how you will know is like taking the identifying the symptoms, like if there is any fever or there is any blood in stools, etc. You should be identifying the symptom and encourage appropriate lifestyle changes, like so that like if there is constipation, tell the patient to take more water, um, or like if there is uh, diarrhea, like if he's taking stress, like any stress is there, and see like if they are taking enough dietary fiber in their food, there are any healthy say healthy lifestyle, like taking healthy food or not, etc. Like you should take note of it and then can encourage the patient to have a healthy lifestyle. And do not see if you are administering the drug appropriately, like do not administer laxatives if bowel obstruction is possible, like let's say like the intestine is being obstructed in the middle because of some bulk of stool, like or like any stricture or etc. If you use the laxatives, it might increase the stool softening and it will increase the peristaltic movement. But what's happening, it is not being passed out because of the stricture or something, because of the obstruction, and this might cause more problem. The intestine may get like more um, strained. It can get strained because of the increased stool in one place. So do not administer laxatives if bowel obstruction is possible, and do not administer antidiarrheal drugs if infection is possible, because if there is an infection, the pathogen should be flushed out through the diarrhea. But if you are giving an antidiarrheal drug, the pathogen whatever is causing the diarrhea might stay in the intestine itself, and it might multiply and it might enter the systemic circulation. Now come to other nursing implication. Monitor for any severe abdominal pain, vomiting or coffee ground or bloody emesis, vomiting or blood in stool or tarry stools. Every this you should monitor in case the diarrhea is getting worse, or like if there are some conditions where the drugs might have these kind of side effects. So you should keep monitoring. Observe for dizziness. If the dizziness is continuing, you should obtain the electrolytes levels of the patient, because in diarrhea you might see the patient might lose many electrolytes. Continue to monitor periodic hepatic and renal function test and electrolyte levels as needed, because the drugs might have this uh, adverse effects on the hepatic or renal system. Monitor vital signs, particularly respiratory rate and depth, on patients who are taking opioids. because like there's or opioid related drugs like opioid agonists he's taking, so they might cause any side effects of their own. So you should monitor the vital signs also. So with this topic, antidiarrheals and purgatives are finished. If you have any doubts regarding this, you can comment down below the video. Thank you.